Up next, sales legend, customer service and sales legend, I should say, Ron Davies, an interesting man that I've known for a long, long time who's helped me. I've been his customer in an industry that is rarely focused upon in the world of sales or customer service because there's so little of it. Ron is a master and an absolutely fantastic human being, a great employee, a great manager, and, an absolutely incredible customer service and sales expert. I hope you enjoy this fantastic interview with a guy who is far too humble for his own good, Mr. Ron Davies.
Ron Davies, customer service and sales legend. How are you?
I am doing well today. How about yourself?
I'm doing really, really well.
Good.
Ron, you're a guy I've known for, I don't know, was it 15 years or 20 years? It's been a while.
It's definitely been a while.
And I've never worked for you, and I've never worked with you, but I have had the rarefied opportunity to be a customer.
It's true.
And I'll tell you, I've bought a lot of things. I've spent a lot of money. I've trained a lot of people to get money from other people, sales, customer service, so on and so forth. You know, I have a lot of experience in this area. So when my compliment comes to you, I know your nature is to be embarrassed and not consider it for reality. But let me just tell you, sir, you are one of the finest sales and customer service people I have ever met in my life.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's something I've tried making a career out of, over the last 30 plus years. So
I'd say you
enjoy, So.
There's trying and then there's doing, and you surpass trying by a long shot. I've noticed you in all kinds of situations, different economic attitudes and so on and so forth. And just for the record, for the people listening to this, Ron's business, Ron sells firearms, and not just a few, a lot. Ron has an ability about him that is unusual. Within the firearms world, typically there's a level of condescension, particularly to those who do not understand the firearms and the options that are out there. And most of the time, people working in the world of firearms haven't much experience themselves in anything but firearms. So when they have a chance to be superior down to someone, they gladly take it. Ron, on the other hand, despite the fact that he is an expert in not only just the firearms, but the ammunition, the bullet velocities, what's out there, the manufacturers, and how it all works, there's few people who could ever touch him. Now, Ron, you are a guy who I would probably go crazy trying to live up to your name and your reputation in your business. There's so many different types who come in, and during this recent pandemic, you saw a real influx of customers, first-time buyers. Isn't that right?
Yeah, there was a lot of them, probably 25-30% first-time buyers.
That's unusual for you, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, normally we see maybe less than 5%, coming in for a first time in a normal year, a normal time frame. But to have an influx of 25-30% of a first-time buyer, that's a lot of people that need just basic knowledge and basic explanations too.
So they created an environment of more than just a need for information, because you had existing firearms customers who were also wanting to fulfill their needs, and there was a lot of stockpiling going on during this time. Much like the toilet paper craze, people were buying guns and ammunition.
Very much so.
What sort of a situation did that place on the business, and how did that affect the way you handled customers? I mean, there was more customers in there. I mean, the parking lot was full every day. People in lines out the doors. Through that whole time, I never once saw you lose your cool. I have never heard about you losing your cool. I've watched you be a consummate professional in all times, good and bad. During that whole time, and it's getting better now. Things are starting to show up. And for many of you who don't know, I am a shooting enthusiast. I've always been fascinated with firearms. I got my first rifle when I was 12 years old from my grandfather, and I'm a big advocate for the safe, legal ownership of firearms, as is Ron. What sort of things do you think? What sort of things did you do to make sure everything stayed so calm in there? I mean, you had people who were losing their cool and going crazy. How'd you do it?
A lot of it's organization. It's just training staff, an organized way of how to deal with people, and personally on it, explain things a lot. As a new time gun buyer, there's a lot more explanation that needs to be going into the sale than the person that's had many, that has more experience in it. So it took more time involved in somebody that has a first time gun purchase, so because you want to explain all the needs of what you're going to use it for, where you're going to be, what you're going to do, and what you have at home and what type of storage situations and people at home. So it took a lot more time and patience, but it's something that you also could find joy in, because that's another person that is basically coming to the fold of popularization of guns and self-defense. You put it and looked at it as they're one of us now, they're a fan.
That's a very, very interesting way to perceive it. A lot of people who, live in urban areas where gun crime is a huge problem and so on and so forth, and they come to states like ours, in Utah, where gun ownership is not only common, it's part of our culture. And we don't have the gun violence issues here because we do own them responsibly, because we do get trained, because we shoot them, and because it is part of our culture. It's not much like the Maoris and their tattoos, or the Native Americans and their tobacco, or whatever it may be. There's all sorts of cultural significance with things, and this is something that's part of ours. And so it's, for those of you listening to this, whatever, who might not be familiar with firearms, so on and so forth, the reality of it is that there's a lot more to it than what the news media would have you understand. I don't like to get too terribly political in these types of things, but this is a very important subject to me. And Ron's an important guy because he and I love what you said, Ron. You took it as an opportunity to bring people into your way of thinking, to our way of thinking, and I had not considered that.
Yeah, this is something that you basically do because it's education. You're basically treating them as a pupil there that you're educating and letting them choose options of different type of ways to protect themselves and their family, and also the need. They see the need out there, and they can see the need going forth, and you're going to say, okay, now you have this. Now you need to go get education. Now get experience. Who in your area has firearms or is willing to go and teach you some of these things? One thing is placing it in their hand, but also being confident enough to express to them the need for education and for experience and somebody that can help train them so they can be competent, because it's going to be useless to them if they're not competent.
Now, obviously, I totally agree with you, and I think that's where a lot of actual gun accidents and gun violence occurs. People go out and they buy a gun in some unnamed city on some unnamed coast, either east or west, and they take this gun, they buy a box of bullets, they go home, they wrap it in an oily rag and stick it in a shoebox on top of their closet, and they never tell anyone they have it. They don't want to shoot it themselves, and lo and behold, one day, little Johnny finds said pea shooter, and then there lies your problem, right? Whereas I was raised in a home, and a grandfather, loaded guns were all over the place, and I don't know anybody who's been involved in a gun incident. I don't know anybody who's been. I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody personally. I don't know a single soul, and everybody has guns. And so there is that constant need for training, that constant need for all of that. People get a lot of their gun information from a source that is outside of the gun world. In fact, most people who know very little about guns, most of their gun knowledge comes from one place and one place alone. That'd be Hollywood, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of misnomers and there's a lot of misinformation about the industry. How do you combat that when you're dealing with all these new buyers? I shouldn't say combat. How do you resolve that? People come in and they say, well, I want this, I want that, I want to get a Mac 10, or I want whatever, and they don't know the definition between, I've noticed it today. You watch lawmakers and talk and things, whatever, they don't know the difference between semi-automatic and automatic. They don't have a clue. But semi-automatic sounds so very official. They don't realize that the most basic pea shooters are semi-automatic. How do you take somebody who's clueless and in a timely way educate them? You mentioned that you had to train your staff to do it. There were lines for guns during this time. Before, there was never lines. You might wait a second to help you, but you guys had to literally set up a line like you would at a butcher shop, where you almost took a number and you stood back there and you waited and got your turn. How did you broach that? How did you get people straight?
It came down to you had basically figure out you can't spend too much time with them because you've got 30 people more in line looking at you, waiting, wanting your experience and their purchase also. But you also have to get in the basics with that particular person so that they feel confident in their purchase and feel like it's a positive experience for them. And a lot of it's showing a little bit of the passion and love that you have for what they're basically wanting to purchase, that you like those, then you're confident in their performance. And that's what they want to know, that the thing that they're buying will perform to the level that they're wanting. So you're going to explain to them in terms that they can understand, and also the correct terms. So when they do hear other terms out there from Hollywood or from the news that are incorrect, that they'll recognize it. And they will say, oh, that's not what this gun does. It doesn't dump 30 rounds in a second, It shoots them automatically. Each trigger pull is one at a time, and as long as you're teaching them gun type safety and things like that along the way, you succeed.
How do you deal with issues of nomenclature? One of the most common misconceptions. People don't know the difference between a magazine and a clip. Because someone in Hollywood who's never touched a gun in their life will go make a movie about, guns or Rambo or whatever, and they'll say, oh, I got a clip. It's not a clip. A clip isn't a magazine. A magazine has a spring-fed device that goes into a gun and shoots bullets. A clip merely holds bullets and is shoved into a magazine or reciprocal device that will feed the rifle. So how do you deal with those types of things? When people come in and say things incorrectly, so on and so forth, do you correct them? How do you do that?
I don't try to sit there and correct. It's not my job to sit and correct nomenclature, to be the nomenclature police, because all it does is get everybody's dander up. I try to just then repeat back the question with the proper nomenclature on it, that, hey, this holds 30 rounds in this magazine. How many do you want told? Do you want a 20-round magazine, a 30-round magazine? If they come in asking for a clip, or they come in asking for a Winchester 870. You go, I've got a Ring 70 right here, and this is what it does. And it's just, I think a lot of times, instead of correcting them, you just state back to them the correct thing, and I think genuinely they see basically the error in it, and they go on. It doesn't become a
and they're not embarrassed. You're a very kind man. You're a very kind man, and I think it's safe to say that in the community where you and I have done so much business, so on and so forth, there's a lot of options and a lot of places to buy firearms. You're not the only show in town, not by a long shot, but you're the best, and you guys sell the most. And once again, it's not entirely because of selection. A lot of it has had to do for years. I mean, I've been shopping with you, like I said, for my entire adult life, long before you guys even had. I mean, your place used to be mostly Western wear. And then over time, there was a lot of hunting rifles, and over time, it's kind of morphed into this thing where, gosh, the owner of the store, and he may need to consider flipping the gun side to the Western wear side and the Western wear side to the gun side. It's gotten so big, but you guys have done that, and I think it's entirely in credit to you. Do you know that? I'm telling you that you're the difference. You're the absolute difference there, because you set the tone for all of the employees. As a manager, you excel, and that's something that's so rare and hard to find. Because you don't own the business, you work this business, and you do a great job at this business. You really do take it to heart, and you treat it, as it is your. And I've always appreciated that about you. That little nugget you just gave us is solid gold. How did, when someone says something wrong in nomenclature, instead of trying to correct them or straighten them out, you simply respond in a way that shows the correct information without making them small or silly. And if they want to learn, great. If not, like you said, you're not the nomenclature police, are you?
No, but I mean, a lot of management end of it that I've basically tried to play is I lead from the front. I lead from right in the middle of the rest of my employees. They see the example. They see what excitement everybody else has, and you be able to capitalize on each other's excitement, on each other's knowledge, and you learn from each other. And that's the biggest thing is you're there, and you're not the typical manager sitting in an office and people coming to you for questions. You're there immediately, and you're always available because you're right next to them.
Do you feel like the manager is the person who sets the tone for the sales staff handle the customers?
most definitely.
I do too.
The manager's always right there, and they can see exactly how he deals with things. They can see exactly how they should deal with things by that same tone.
So if you're a manager and you're in your management style, and I'm afraid to say many people, their management style, and there used to be a guy, and I don't mind calling him out by name because as much as Norm Van Wagenen liked me, Norm Van Wagenen was and is an absolute prick. And the reason he's not in business today is because he was a prick to people who worked at the ATF, which is a group you should not be a prick to. You know, he gave some back talk slap to a lady. They went in and they decided to go through all of this stuff. And almost everybody's going to have a mistake somewhere here or there. I mean, you go through everything I've ever written or anything I've said, you'll catch me stumbling on a word or some place where I've forgotten a period or I've misspelled, something. It happens. And Norm's a perfect example of a guy who owned a business, very successful business, who did very, very well. Customer service sucked. And even though he had the most amount of firearms, even though he had some of the very best prices, his attitude trickled down to everybody who worked for him, and everybody who worked there got the same kind of we don't need you, so get out of here, get out of line. You want to buy a gun? Yes or no? Yes or no? Well, we don't take that. Don't. You remember, and I know you're a very charitable individual, and it's not your nature to complain about other people or the way they do things. But let me just be the person that I am, which points out the facts. Norm was a jerk, and you're the absolute polar opposite. You're the reason that I stopped buying guns from Norm Van Wagenen. And a lot of people did, and I think, honestly, to your credit, that's why. I think that's why Norm got smaller and smaller over the years, because people started realizing, I don't have to take a bunch of abuse from some guy in some specialized field. I can go to a guy like Ron. And Ron, you're a guy who could sell Bentleys, you could sell suits, you could sell just anything. You would, if you came to me and said, "Hey Nate, I'm really over this whole gun thing. I found a definition of life, and I don't want to be selling boom sticks no more. What do you suggest?" I'd help you find a career in a variety. I mean, you'd be great. You'd be, holy cow, anyone would die to have you. You know what I mean? You're so good. I've always believed that sales is sales, and whether you know how to sell cellular phones or private jets or firearms, it really are the same processes, and you would just excel in absolutely everything. Let me ask you this, Ron. When you're hiring people, salespeople, what is it you look for people who you're not going to hire? Because we all know about, like, okay, you ask managers, what do you look for, and they basically give you the scout law or whatever. They want you to be truthful, kind, obedient, cheerful. You know what I mean? What kinds of things do you, when someone comes in and then they apply for a job, and you don't have to name anyone by name, what sorts of traits and things do you see and say, oh, no, it's not going to work for me?
A lot of times it's pride. If they're teachable. If they're too proud and think they already know it all, it's hard to figure they are going to be sitting alongside of you.
Ego.
So you got to be teacher. Ego. Yeah, a lot of it's ego. Because even if you do know a lot about something, you can still be taught. I go to it every day thinking I'm going to learn something new today.
And I think you do.
You can grasp. So
I found that while I've been with you, we've been looking for an answer for something. You'll get to the bottom occasionally. This is happening. We've done so much. We've done so many transactions, so much business together over the years, and I've brought so many of my friends and my son Lorenzo and all these things in. I've seen where you said, "Hey, well, I guess that's something new," and you say, "Oh," and you don't have to pretend that you already knew. You know, that's something they've done. That's a new change. Okay, and you roll with it so effortlessly. Pride is an interesting thing, and that's something that you are really the absolute opposite of someone who's prideful. I've never met somebody who is as good as what they do and is down to earth and easygoing and simple about it as you are. I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but occasionally if somebody wants to get confrontational with me, I'll be like, well, here's why you're a moron, and since I'm the only multimillionaire on the phone having this conversation, we're going to go ahead and go with my opinion. My ego will take over, because it's results based, and I'm right, but not necessarily. I've read once that you make a decision in life, you get to decide whether you're going to be right or happy. And I think you're a man who's figured out that it's better to be happy. What do you think about that?
That's true. You got to look at yourself in the mirror every day and be comfortable with who it is. And if you're there being right all the time, sometimes it's not as pretty. The face staring back at you because you end up being a twisted man.
Because it would be easy to get there and say hey Ron, are silencers illegal? And you could go on some rant because it's the 747th time that someone asked you in that month if silencers are legal. Something that you're selling in your store, it's like they're obviously legal. So it would be so easy to flip out and say, well, of course. Have you just not? What are you dumb? You don't know stuff? But I see you time and time again. As I'm waiting for you to help me, and you so graciously do so often. In fact, all your staff does. You guys are all so wonderful. You all treat me absolutely perfectly there, and you're so understanding of anything I need. You guys are just great. You always help. And Ron is a guy who will track down some $6 part that's not even carried in the store. And if it is, they make $3 on it, Ron will spend the time to track it down, get the right one. There was a little scope cover made out of plastic, and Ron had to go back and forth 2 or 3 different times. And I think in the end of the day, Ron, I'm going to embarrass you here, I think Ron actually literally personally went out and bought it online somewhere and got it for me rather than there was a tag on it from the other store. And I think that he was just trying to help me out so bad that he ended up just taking it out of his own personal time and effort to go get it. That's the kind of guy Ron is. He's a guy who loves his customers. And in the grand scheme of things, it's a good move. I've spent a few dollars with you, I suppose, huh?
You have. You've been very good. So it's one of those that you got to keep the customer happy. I mean, you figure that they're the life source of your business. If you basically keep turning them away, your blood's going to end up dry, and you'll end up with nothing at the end. So a lot of it is keeping them happy, and you finding some happy in the meantime of making that happen. So
it's interesting that you've done these types of things, though, where you reckon. I think a lot of people in sales and business, I think they tend to focus on one thing and say, well, this particular single isolated issue doesn't make sense, so I'm not going to do it. Whereas you, I think, are better at saying, well, no, Nate's been in here for, 15 or 20 years, and this is what's gone on. He spent this amount of money. Holy cow, well, why wouldn't I go down and chase down the $6 part for him? And a lot of people wouldn't. But you constantly surprise me with your efforts. Constantly surprise me. And you're such a wonderful guy. I'll tell you, I couldn't say enough things about you. You're the kind of guy I'd like my daughter to marry. She just turned 12, and we practice. We've been practicing going on dates for about a year, and we're practicing, so when she starts dating at 16, because I'm that kind of father, we got her ears just barely pierced. We go on these little practice dates, and we talk about how things should go. And, opening doors, so on and so forth. And literally, we were talking about 2 weeks ago. I said, do you remember, he said, Ron? She said, yeah. I said, that's the kind of man you want to marry. And she's like, okay. So we actually had a discussion about that just like 10 or 12 days ago, right near her birthday. So that's my opinion of you. I think you're first class every which way. And not only that, you are different. So many people think of salespeople as these slick talking, pushy people who, just want their money, so on and so forth. And you are just so different from any of those stereotypes. You're living proof that a guy can be, it's a wonderful human being, really care about people and nice and fair, be compensated more than ethically for it. What do you think are the things that have gone on in your life that have made you this way? I mean, certainly you were born with a good nature as a child. But what sorts of things have you done in order to maintain that peace, that kindness, that charity that you constantly give to me and to so many other people?
Well, I think that overall it's, the customer needs to be happy with his decision. And also he needs to feel that he's not being pushed into something. I always try to educate somebody the options and let them choose. Stand back and say, okay, this is the option. This is what's good, bad, and better. Good, better, and best type deal options, and then let them choose so they feel confident in that instead of thinking, it's just all the opinion of the salesperson there. So I've found happiness in doing that, where it's low key. It's all the stress levels pushed down. That you feel that you don't have stress. They're always going to have stress on buying something because they're spending money. Their hard-earned money. So they're in a stressful situation. They don't want to feel your stress on your end of trying to shove something basically in front of them that they want to sell. always want them to feel it's their decision. They ask for something specific when they come in, I'm going to sell it to them. That's what they want.
They come in, they want to buy something that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and they come in and want to buy brand X. I'll show them brand X. I'll also, in the meantime, show them brand Z right when they've already decided. Look at this one too. This is pretty cool, but I'm not going to basically.
So if I come in, so if a customer comes in and they want something totally dumb because they saw it in a movie, you're going to help facilitate them getting what they want rather than getting what you think is best.
I'm going to show it to them, and I'm going to say, hey, these are a couple. I'm just going to still show them the good, better, the best. Good, better, the best are all going to have their choice in that 3 mix. And there's a lot of times they'll still leave with the exact same thing that they come in for. And
is that most common?
Happiness to it. Yeah. There's probably 75% of the time they'll still leave with exactly what they wanted, but sometimes they were not aware of, the other items, and so they'll say, "Oh, I didn't think about that," or "I didn't know about this." So a lot of times they'll then, from you explaining that item or bringing it to their attention, they'll say, "Oh, I'm go home and look at that again," or "I'm going to buy it right now because I like that so much." So.
A fairly common scene I've noticed there at the store is I'll walk in and you're standing there and in front of you a glass case, and on top of this glass case 4 or even 5 different firearms of similar nature are sitting on top of the glass, and a bedazzled customer, usually it's a man with his wife or a man and his brother or a friend, because they've brought someone for emotional support. That's usually when you've got a very serious decision about to be made, or somebody's really struggling to make that decision because they're there with that emotional support group. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's definitely something because they're uncertain. They're tense. They're knowing that they need something, but they're unsure of what their choice is going to be. So, yeah, a lot of times they'll bring a wingman or a wingwoman, along with them to help. So
that's true for a lot of different industries.
It is, and you don't want to give them too much information. You want to throw out the whole kitchen sink at them. Give them 3 or 4 options and explain the differences in them, and then stand back and let them basically figure it out. So.
When you get too many options, a lot of times it puts people in the thing that I've heard it called, and I like the name, the analysis paralysis, where they've given you so much information, it's almost impossible to make a decision. And if people buy now, and they might come back later, but it's better to sell them now rather than later, isn't it?
It is. I mean, because they're already there in your store. They're already there in your presence. If they turn around and go home, they say, well, maybe we're going to go down to brand X down the road. We've seen what these guys did. And you already give them all the information and education, well, then they go down the road and purchase it somewhere else. So it's best if you can just sell it to them while they're there.
So the trick is to give them enough information where they have options, because people do need options, right? People, if they don't have options, they're not as likely to buy. They want to have, even if the other 2 options are horrible, they can say, "Oh, I like that one." That's actually kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, that scenario. So you're standing there on one side of the glass case, the customer on the other side, and they have their hand on their one of their hands, their left hand perhaps, in a fist against their hip, and their right hand up to their mouth, and they're looking down, kind of almost standing straight up, but their head's just bent over, and they're looking down, trying to figure out which one of these things is going to do what I want it to do, which is the best choice here. And there's all these things that are going on in their mind. What things do you do to help them get landed on? Because that's what it's about, right? If you're selling cars or houses or cell phones or payment plans for some sort of a service, how do you help them land on that one item? Because if they can't decide which item to get, they're not going to buy. They're going to go home until they meet somebody who gives them a chance to buy. Hey, you're focused in on this. What are the things that you do to help people get landed on the ultimate purchase that they're going to make? In your subtle way.
A lot of it is just explaining to them the features, which features is most important to them, and let them basically start weeding it out at that point. You're going to explain to them the make, model, designs of them, and bring out those particular ones from their needs. So you establish their needs first up, and then you basically try to establish then the features that are the most important, and start weeding them back out. And then hopefully you weed them down to 1 or 2 models at that point. So then they can say, oh, okay, this one is, this much money, this one is this much money. Does the two difference in price matter, or do I like the features of the one the most for my needs? So
when a customer, you're so easygoing about all that, and you do help them get there. But when a customer straight up says, hey, you know what should I do? What do you say?
And you're going to give them your basically option of it is like, this is the best option, and give them an honest opinion. They're going to appreciate honesty.
At that point they're asking for it, aren't they? So when they come in, they say,
yep.
hey, I want this bizarre gun from, that Chuck Norris movie. You're like, oh, okay. And then you'll show them the options. But if they come to you and say, hey, literally, what should I get, or what do you think? Then you say, this is what I would do. And that's why I've heard you say it. I've heard you say, this is what I would do. Instead of saying, here's what you need to do, you say, this is what I would do. And by taking that personalization and saying, this is for me, and so if you think I'm making a good decision, well, that's what I would do. And I've noticed that sometimes you'll add a little bit on the end where you say, but it's whatever you want. Have you ever noticed yourself in that word? Have you ever noticed yourself using that word track? I've watched you do it 100 times. Have you ever noticed that?
Interesting observation. Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is at the end of the day, they need to be comfortable with their decision, and it wasn't my decision. I try to teach the guys and always express to them, they're not there to hear your opinions.
If I had to send somebody in to negotiate for my life in a hostage situation, I'd send you. There's so many great salespeople that I know, and they're awesome, wonderful. You're this mild-mannered guy who literally can just soothe the savage beast, and you have what's the word I'm looking for? It's not that you're passive. You're just so easygoing, but you're absolutely deliberate in everything that you do. It's a fascinating combination, you're a person who would have made a great law enforcement officer for sure, because you know how to talk to people, get them calm without losing your mind. I've never seen you once, even under the dead of stress. I've seen you when you're sick, working under extreme conditions, and you're still polite and charming, nice, and how can I help you? What's going on? When you have personal struggles in your life, I assume you do. I assume you don't have a perfect life. I'm sure your children and your wife and your neighbors and the people you work with and all these people in your life, your parents and in-laws, I'm sure that at some point they give you trouble, do they not?
No, I'm like everybody else. I mean, you're always dealing with something out there that you have to deal with, and the biggest thing is you can't let it affect who you are. I always come out with the attitude is you are responsible for your own attitude. Nothing else.
It's so funny how many people will take
for that.
They'll take their personal problems to work. Compartmentalization is something you're very, very good at. And I was hired by a group to talk to one of their sales guys, and actually went over to talk to him at his desk, and he was there and he was playing a video game on his phone. 33-year-old guy, had a wife and kids, and I went over there and said, because everybody had tried everything. They tried all the motivational things. They played him, all the motivational clips from the internet and the movies, and told him that he was a good guy, so on and so forth. And so I went over and I said, so what's your excuse? He says, well, what do you mean? I'm like, what's your excuse? He's like, excuse for what? I'm like, your numbers suck. You're not making a bunch of money. Next your time you're sitting here playing a video game. What's your excuse? And he looked at me and he said, I've been having a really hard time at home. I'm like, tell me about it. And he tells me that his father had just died, and he tells me that it's been hard on his relationship, and his mother is alone now, and there's all these things that are going on, but ultimately it boils down to this father dying, right? It's hard to have your father die when you're young like that. And I said, well, I'm not going to tell you that it's normal for a man to die at age 60. I'm not going to tell you that it's okay. I'm not even going to tell you that this is part of the circle of life or give you some load of crap from the Lion King. I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm going to tell you is that this is ruining your life, though. And he says, what do you mean? I'm like, you can't compartmentalize. What would your dad rather have you happen? Would you rather have you just feel so sorry that you can't even work and provide a home, so you lose your house because you're not making enough money to pay your mortgage? You're going to lose everything. what would your dad want for you? And he sat there and thought for a minute. He's like, I never thought of it that way. I said, well, yeah. So what is it you're going to do? And I think that's something that you do so well that you're able to say, hey, you know what? You could have a dog chewing on your leg, having someone pointing a gun to your head, and the phone would ring there at work, or even not at work. You take calls all the time. You take calls when it's not even business hours. I'll send you a text because you've been good enough to give me your cell phone number. I'll send you a text sometimes, and I don't expect a text back till the next working day or whatever. It'll be totally off hours, and you'll say, hey, I can get that for you, no problem. I mean, you're so on it. But you could have a dog chewing your legs, have someone point a gun at your head, and your child could be in the hospital with cancer, and you'd say, it's a great day, how can I help you, Mr. Customer? You'd be right on it. And it would be so hard to decipher if you're having a bad day, to the point where I don't know if you really are having a good day or not. I don't ever know, because you're so good about keeping that compartmentalized. Do you think that that's been a big part of your success?
I think it has. I mean, it's something. I grew up on a ranch, in eastern Utah, and it's something that you always had. If you know anything in farming wise on it, there's always something that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Whether it's cows getting out or the tractor breaking or something going on.
The animals need to be fed every day, don't they?
And that is, and that's something that dependability wise that my father taught me is you always got to feed the cows. You always got to do the chores.
You always got to feed the cows.
You got to be responsible. So, but you also got to figure out joy in everything that you do, and you also got to figure out that there's always tomorrow, and it's a new fresh day.
There's always tomorrow. It's a fresh day. That's an interesting concept. My very first job was working on the ranch. I worked for this old guy named Arvin Anderson. He's a leathery old cowboy that you might have seen in a Norman Rockwell painting. He must have been about 6'4" and weighed about 160, 70 pounds, and just big old hands were like pancakes that wrap around yours, and just pure leather. And he never had a lot to say, but he always spoke with such intent and consistency. And you and he literally do have some similar personality traits. You're a little nicer than he was. But he wasn't famous for being nice, but he was a very calm man. And I remember one time we were out chopping down this big old tree that had fallen, and we were going to move it. And I remember the chainsaw. He was having me tighten it up, and then he said, "Here, let me show you a better way to do that." And he cut his arm, and the arm was bleeding. And instead of stopping and dropping everything, putting it all over his arm, he just kept working. I said, "You cut yourself." He's like, "You don't think I don't know that?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sure you do, but I just wanted to make." He's like, "I'm not going to bleed out from that, and taking another 5 seconds to finish this chain isn't going to cost anything either. So I'm going to finish this job, and I'm going to move on to that." And I remember thinking, you know what? He's absolutely right. And it's that type of a demeanor that you possess and that he possesses. And maybe it's something that comes from working on ranches when you grow up. It's an attitude of, okay, now what? Okay, now what? And I think you could get some very bad news, and I think that would be your response. Well, now what? Okay. Do you resonate with that?
I do. That's one of those things that, again, it comes back to the attitude end of it. Is all those things can be rained down on you, and you're still responsible for your own attitude. You can still be cheerful, and you can still be helpful. You can still have a smile on your face because you're responsible for that. Many
times I'll call your business instead of bothering you on your cell phone because I feel so guilty about doing it because you're so gosh darn nice. But people who work at your business, some of the best phone customer service I've ever received in my life. When I call on the phone, they don't get interrogative. They're like, well, why do you want to talk to Ron? Whatever. They're always, sure, hold on, let me get you back to the right person. And I have never had a call dropped. I've never had a situation where I felt like it's been handled poorly. And some of the best businesses in the world have horrible phone customer service. Horrible. You name me the Fortune 500 company, I'll tell you where I've had a bad phone call with them. I'll tell you in fact, I'd be hard pressed to tell you where I've had a good one. But your people are always so good on the phone. Do you do any training for the phones, or is it just something that everybody's just picked up on their own?
I think a lot of it's just, again, it's leading by example. That they know that, hey, I can answer the phone just as easy as they can, and they'll watch me do that and see what type of demeanor or what type of an attitude you have on the phone. Because they need to feel through the phone when you're answering it that you're excited to be there. You're happy.
Yeah.
And if they
I think a
can't
lot
feel
of
that, why would you want to come in?
why would you want to come in?
Yeah.
I think a lot of managers kind of set themselves up in I wouldn't say an ivory tower, but in an elevated place perhaps. And so they coach their employees, basically say, well, don't pass them to me. Well, I don't want to talk to them. You handle this. And they get this attitude where it's kind of like, well, you can't talk to the manager unless you have specific permission to do so. And you're always willing to, someone says, I'd like to talk to the manager or Ron. You're always, oh, yeah, let me get on the phone, let me do it. And I think because you've created that sort of an attitude where you are willing to take a call and do that, you have led by example, and consequently, your employees are not on the defense. There are so many businesses you'll call into. I called in to buy a car, I don't know, from a dealership out of state. It's a very special car, a unique one that I wanted to have. And I called in, and I got the interrogation. Well, what do you want to talk to him for? I'm like, well, you guys are a car dealership, right? Yes. Okay. Well, guess what I want? Take a wild freaking guess. You heard that movie Face Off, where Nicolas Cage is in the surgery center and they go out and get the doctor and they got a gun to his head and he says, what do you want? And then it shows like his reflection. There's no face on his thing, and he says, take a wild freaking guess, and he's got a cigarette. And that's how you feel half the time when you call these businesses. So for you, it's a lead by example training that you do constantly, where you show them that it's okay to take calls and it's okay to do things. I do a lot of phone training. I teach people how to sell on the phone, so they make commitments over the phone. That's like another level. But you have an inviting place where people feel like they can talk to you because they can.
You got if you basically talk the talk, you got to walk the walk too.
And you sure do. I got to tell you, I admire you so much, and I've always liked you so much. You're one of my favorite people that I've ever known, and you're just such a good guy. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about sales and customer service. You really are so good, and so in my view, highly underappreciated and highly undervalued and definitely underpaid. You are really you're really a treasure, and I value knowing you. And I appreciate everything that you told us, and even I've learned something. So thanks for that.
You betcha. Thanks, Nate. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to do anything I can do to help you.
You really are the best. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you later, Ron, then.
All right. See you, Nate.
Bye, friend.
Bye.
Ron has transcended the ego usually involved in sales and customer service, and just in our daily lives for that matter. He is able to go to work and work on behalf of his boss, his employer, the business, and puts everything to the side and truly takes on the identity of that role. A truly incredible human being, and boy, thanks for checking out Sales Therapy. Be sure to follow us if you haven't by subscribing, and watch the next video, and of course give us a call. The phone number's down below, or check out our website, NateHoltzaffel.com. If you can spell that, well, you're pretty smart.